The stars were dying. Admiral Zextai watched through the bridge windows as another sun went dark. The Devourers had reached it 3 hours ago. Now where there had once been light and warmth, there was only cold metal and the endless hunger of machines. His 4 hands gripped the command chair as the ship shook. The enemy was getting closer to Kepler's Gate, the last safe world in the galaxy. Around him, officers from 17 different species worked at their stations. The Althari with their blue skin, the tall Kethran warriors, the floating energy beings called Luminar, all of them were afraid. "Sir, we're getting reports from the outer defenses," said Commander Yilseth. She was Veltar, one of the telepathic race. Her large eyes were wet with tears. "They're breaking through." Zextai nodded. He had expected this. The Devourers always broke through. They had been doing it for months now. World after world, system after system. Nothing could stop them. The Devourers weren't like any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They weren't alive, not really. They were machines, but not the simple robots that some species built. These machines thought. They learned. They grew stronger with every battle. Worst of all, they ate everything, not just people or animals, but entire planets. They would strip away the rock, the metal, the very atoms, and turn it all into more of themselves. Where they passed, nothing remained but empty space. "How many ships do they have?" Sexty asked. "Our sensors can't count them all," replied the tactical officer, a Nexus Collective android with glowing red eyes. "The number keeps growing. They're building more ships even as they attack." On the main screen, Zextai could see the enemy fleet. It looked like a cloud of metal insects, each one the size of a city. They moved together like they shared one mind. In a way, they did. The Devourers were connected by quantum signals that traveled faster than light. When one learned something, they all learned it. The Coalition had tried everything. Their best scientists had built new weapons. Their greatest generals had planned brilliant strategies. The psychic races had tried to confuse the machines' minds. The energy beings had attacked them directly. Nothing worked. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Council," said the communications officer. "Put it through." The screen changed to show a meeting room on Kepler's Gate. Around a large table sat the leaders of all the surviving races. Most of them looked tired and defeated. Some were already saying goodbye to their families. "Admiral Zextai," said High Counselor Velnar of the Luminar. Her voice was like music, but sad music now. "We need your report." "The enemy will reach the planet in 6 hours," Zextai said. "Our fleet is down to 43 ships. We can slow them down, but we can't stop them." The council members looked at each other. Some whispered in their own languages. Others sat in silence. "What about the humans?" asked General Thakmor of the Kethran. "Have we heard anything from their worlds?" Zextai felt his heart sink. The humans had been their last hope. They were strange creatures, these bipeds from the outer rim of the galaxy. They had only joined the Coalition 50 years ago, but in that short time they had impressed everyone with their fighting spirit. While other races fought with honor and followed the rules of war, humans fought to win. They used tactics that others called crazy or desperate. They never gave up even when defeat was certain. Some Coalition members had called them reckless. Others had called them brave. But now, when they needed that human stubbornness the most, the humans were silent. "We sent ships to check on their colonies 3 weeks ago," Zextai said. "The worlds are empty. No signs of battle, no distress calls. They're just gone." "Gone?" asked Counselor Yexi of the Althari. "How can an entire species just disappear?" "We don't know. Our best guess is that the Devourers reached them first. Maybe they had time to evacuate, but..." Zextai didn't finish. Everyone knew there was nowhere to evacuate to. The humans had controlled 12 worlds on the edge of Coalition space. They weren't the most advanced species in the galaxy, but they made up for it with determination. Human soldiers would fight when others would retreat. Human engineers would keep trying when others gave up. There were stories about human Marines holding positions against impossible odds. Tales of human pilots ramming their ships into enemy vessels when their weapons ran out. The other species didn't always understand humans, but they respected their courage. "So we're truly alone now," said High Counselor Velnar. "The last free beings in the galaxy." "It appears so," Zextai replied. The meeting ended soon after. There wasn't much more to say. The council would meet again in a few hours to discuss surrender terms, though everyone knew the Devourers didn't take prisoners. They would convert any useful technology and recycle the rest. After the transmission ended, Zexatai stood alone on the bridge. Through the windows, he could see the glow of battle in the distance. The outer defense platforms were fighting bravely, but they were being overwhelmed. His personal communicator chirped. It was a message from his family on Kepler's gate. His mate and their 3 children were in one of the underground shelters waiting for the end. "Papa," said his youngest child's voice, "will the humans come to save us like in the stories?" Zextai closed his eyes. Humans had become legends among the Coalition's children. Stories of the brave warriors from Earth who never gave up, who always found a way to win, but those were just stories now. "I don't know, little one," he whispered to the empty bridge. The ship shook again, harder this time. The enemy was getting closer. Soon Zextai would give the order for the final battle. His crew would fight bravely, and they would die bravely, and it would make no difference at all. On his tactical display, red dots showed the positions of Devourer ships. There were thousands of them, maybe millions. They stretched across space like a metal sea, covering everything in darkness. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zextai felt true despair. The galaxy that his species had helped build, the civilization that had taken millions of years to create, would be gone in a few hours, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. He thought about the humans one more time. Wherever they had gone, he hoped they had found peace before the end came for them too. At least they wouldn't have to watch their children die. The stars continued to go dark one by one as the Devourers fed. Soon there would be no light left in the galaxy at all. 3 months had passed since Kepler's gate fell. The Devourers had taken their time with the fortress world, stripping it down layer by layer until nothing remained but empty space and bad memories. Commander Yilseth huddled in the cargo hold of a damaged freighter, one of the few ships that had escaped the final battle. Around her, 37 survivors from different species shared their meager supplies and fading hope. They were hiding in an old asteroid field, trying to stay invisible while the enemy consolidated their conquest. The Devourers had changed their pattern. Instead of pushing forward immediately, they had stopped to build. Huge construction ships arrived at each conquered system, setting up factories and refineries. They were getting ready for something bigger. "Commander," whispered Tekva, a young Althari engineer, "we're picking up strange signals again." Yilseth floated over to the communication station they had cobbled together from spare parts. For weeks now, they had been detecting odd transmissions from the void between galaxies. The signals were faint and seemed to use no known technology. "Same as before?" she asked, "similar but stronger." "And Commander," Tekva's blue face went pale, "I think I recognize some of the signal patterns." "From where?" "From human transmissions. The old Coalition archives have examples of their communication protocols. This looks like their quantum encryption, but modified somehow." Yilseth felt her telepathic abilities reach out automatically, trying to sense deception or hope in the young engineer's mind. She found both. Tekva wanted to believe the humans were still alive, but he was also terrified of being wrong. "Show me," she said. The data scrolled across their makeshift screen. Yilseth wasn't an expert in human technology, but she had worked with human officers during the war. Their communication methods were unusual, more aggressive and direct than other species used. "There," Tekva pointed. "See that pulse pattern? That's definitely human quantum encryption. But the power levels are impossible. No human ship we know about could generate signals this strong." "Maybe they built bigger ships," suggested Mextor, a Kethran warrior who was cleaning his weapons for the 100th time. "Commander," another voice called from across the hold. It was Dr. Zindal, one of the few Nexus Collective units to survive. His red optical sensors were flickering with excitement. "I believe we should investigate the source of these signals." "Investigate with what?" "We have one broken freighter and enough supplies for 2 weeks. I have been analyzing our situation," the android continued. "The Devourers have not expanded their search pattern to include dead systems. If we travel carefully, we could reach the nearest human colony world. New Olympia is only 4 days away at low power." Yilseth looked around at the other survivors. They were all watching her, waiting for a decision. As the highest-ranking Coalition officer still alive, they looked to her for leadership. But she had been an intelligence analyst, not a ship commander. She felt completely unprepared for this responsibility. "It could be a trap," she said. The Devourers might be using human signals to lure survivors. It could be, Dr. Zindal agreed. But consider our alternatives. We can stay here until our supplies run out, or we can try to find answers. The choice is between certain death and possible hope. The vote was unanimous. Even the children raised their hands in favor of investigating. 4 days later, their battered freighter dropped out of hyperspace near New Olympia. What they found made no sense. The planet was intact, not destroyed, not harvested, not converted into metal and machines. It hung in space exactly as it had before the war, its blue oceans and green continents unchanged. The orbital stations were still there, still powered, still broadcasting automated signals, but there were no life signs anywhere. "This is impossible," whispered Tekva as they entered the planet's atmosphere. "The Devourers were in this system 4 months ago. We have the records. They should have taken everything." They landed at New Geneva, the planet's capital city. Walking through the empty streets felt like exploring a tomb. The buildings were perfect. The power was still on. Automated systems were still working, but every human was gone. In the city's center, they found the first clue, a massive excavation site stretched for kilometers underground. The humans had been digging deep, removing enormous amounts of rock and soil. But for what? Dr. Zindal connected to the city's computer network and downloaded terabytes of data. Most of it was encrypted or corrupted, but fragments remained. References to something called Project Lazarus, orders to evacuate all civilian populations, shipping manifests for materials and supplies that made no sense. "Look at this," he said, projecting holographic displays around them. According to these records, the humans were moving industrial equipment off-world at an incredible rate. Not just from this planet, but from all their colonies simultaneously. "Moving it where?" asked Yilseth, unknown. "The destination coordinates have been purged from all databases." They explored more of the city, finding similar excavation sites everywhere. Whatever the humans had been building, it was enormous. The amount of materials involved boggled the mind. In the government building, they found Admiral Sarah Chen's final message to the planet. The hologram showed a tired-looking human woman in military uniform. "Citizens of New Olympia," the recording said, "by now you know about the evacuation orders. I know this is difficult, but it's necessary for the survival of our species. Project Lazarus is our only hope. When we return, we'll return as something stronger, something that can protect not just humanity, but all the free peoples of the galaxy." The message ended with coordinates, but when they tried to follow them, they led to empty space. "Commander," Tekva called from the spaceport, "you need to see this." The spaceport was massive, easily 10 times larger than it needed to be for a colony world. The launch pads showed signs of recent use, but by ships far larger than anything in the Coalition database. "The blast patterns," Tekva explained, "they suggest vessels at least 5 kilometers long, but humans never built ships that big. Their largest dreadnoughts were barely 1 kilometer. Dr. Zindal was scanning the launch sites with his sensors. The energy readings are unusual as well. These ships weren't using conventional fusion drives. The radiation signature suggests some form of exotic matter propulsion." That night, they camped in the empty city hall. Yilseth tried to use her telepathic abilities to read the psychic impressions left behind by the humans, but found only faint echoes of determination and sadness. They knew they weren't coming back, she told the others. "At least not as they were. What do you think they became?" asked little Pixie, an Althari child who had lost her parents at Kepler's Gate. Yilseth looked up at the stars through the building's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were building more ships, preparing for their next wave of expansion. And somewhere else, perhaps, the humans were building something too. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I hope we find out before it's too late." Above them, the stars seemed different somehow, as if something vast was moving in the darkness between galaxies. Something that had once been human, but was now something else entirely. The data archive hidden beneath New Olympia's government building had taken 2 weeks to decrypt. Commander Yilseth sat surrounded by holographic displays, each one showing pieces of humanity's final plan. What she was reading terrified her more than the Devourers ever had. "This can't be right," she whispered, scrolling through military reports that dated back 50 years. They knew about the Devourers from the very beginning. Dr. Zindal processed data streams at superhuman speed, his android mind racing through terabytes of information. The evidence is clear, Commander. When humans first made contact with the Coalition, they had already discovered traces of previous devourer incursions. Tekva looked up from his workstation, where he had been analyzing human industrial records. They found scars in the galactic rim, dead zones where entire solar systems used to exist. While we celebrated first contact, they were already preparing for war. The truth was spreading out before them like pieces of a horrifying puzzle. 50 years ago, when humanity had seemed eager to join galactic civilization, they had actually been conducting the largest intelligence operation in galactic history. Human diplomats had asked innocent questions about ancient mysteries. Human scientists had requested access to archaeological sites. Human traders had mapped resource locations across Coalition space. All of it had been preparation. Look at this, Ilseth called the others over to her display. It showed a classified human military document titled Devourer Response Protocols Final Draft. The document was written in the direct, brutal style that characterized human military planning. It began with a simple statement. Conventional warfare will fail. All previous civilizations attempted to fight the Devourers using advanced technology, superior tactics, and numerical advantages. All previous civilizations are extinct. The report continued. Analysis of Devourer behavior patterns indicates they adapt to any known form of resistance. They learn from each engagement and develop countermeasures. Victory through conventional means is mathematically impossible. So what was their solution? Asked Mextor. Yilseth scrolled to the next section, her hands shaking. They decided to become something the Devourers had never encountered before. Something that couldn't be predicted or countered because it operated outside the rules of known physics. The document outlined Project Lazarus in terrifying detail. Humanity would evacuate every world, abandon every colony, and transform their entire species into a nomadic war machine. But not just any war machine, something that existed partially outside normal space-time. They call it dimensional warfare, Dr. Zindal reported from another data stream. The humans discovered that the Devourers, despite their advanced technology, operate entirely within our reality's dimensional framework. They cannot adapt to threats that exist in quantum superposition states. In simple terms, asked Tekva, the humans found a way to become partially unreal. Their ships would exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, powered by controlled quantum singularities. Their weapons would attack the fundamental structure of matter itself. Yilseth found more files, each one more disturbing than the last. Humans had volunteered for procedures that would integrate their consciousness with quantum computers. They had agreed to surgical modifications that would allow them to survive in ships powered by black holes. They had chosen to abandon their humanity to become the perfect weapon. The most chilling document was a personal log from Admiral Sarah Chen, dated just days before the evacuation of Earth. Today I said goodbye to my daughter for the last time. The log entry read, she's 7 years old and she asked me why Daddy has to go fight the monsters in the dark. I couldn't tell her that when I come back, if I come back, I won't be her father anymore. I'll be something else, something necessary, the log continued. The psychological evaluations are complete. 97% of our military personnel have volunteered for full integration with the Lazarus systems. They understand what they're giving up. We all do, but someone has to become the nightmare that kills nightmares. More files revealed the scope of the project. Every human world had been simultaneously evacuated. Massive automated factories had been built in the void between galaxies, powered by harvesting energy directly from the quantum foam. The ships they were building were described as probability weapons vessels that could exist in multiple quantum states until they chose to observe themselves into reality. The timeline shows. They've been gone for 50 years, Yilseth said. Building, changing, becoming something else. But why haven't they returned? Asked Little Pixie. The Althari child had been quietly listening to the adults discuss things beyond her understanding. Dr. Zindal accessed more files. According to these projections, they estimated it would take 47 years to complete the transformation and an additional 10 years to construct a fleet capable of engaging the Devourers effectively, which means Tekva did the math quickly. They should be ready to return any time now. A new display caught Yilseth's attention. It was a star map showing Devourer expansion patterns over the past few months. The enemy had been systematically clearing sectors, but their movement pattern was strange. Instead of expanding in all directions equally, they seemed to be avoiding certain areas of space. Look at this, she called the others over. The Devourers aren't moving randomly. They're staying away from the galactic rim, the areas closest to intergalactic space. As if they're afraid of something, Maxtor said, his warrior instincts recognizing a defensive formation. Or someone, Dr. Zindal corrected. They found more evidence in captured Devourer data fragments. The machine intelligence had detected gravitational anomalies in the void between galaxies. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology, quantum distortions that suggested the presence of massive objects that existed in an impossible state of partial reality. The Devourers know something is coming, Yilseth realized. That's why they changed their expansion pattern. They're not consolidating their gains, they're fortifying against an expected attack. A soft alarm chimed from their makeshift communication array. Tekva rushed to check it, his face going pale as he read the display. Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from deep space beyond the galactic rim. Put it through. The speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a human voice. But it was wrong somehow, layered with harmonics that made it sound like multiple people speaking at once. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. We have received your messages. We know about Kepler's Gate, about the Devourer's advance, about the suffering of the Coalition survivors. The voice paused, and in the silence they could hear something like music. If music could be made from the sound of reality bending, we're sorry we couldn't return sooner. The transformation took longer than expected, and the final preparations required our full attention. But we're ready now. Another pause, longer this time. To any Coalition survivors who can hear this, stay hidden for the next 48 hours. After that, the galaxy will be safe again. We promise. The transmission ended, leaving them in stunned silence. 48 hours, whispered Yilseth. Outside their shelter, the stars seemed to shimmer differently, as if reality itself was holding its breath. Reality screamed. Commander Yilseth felt it first through her telepathic abilities, a sensation like the universe itself was being torn apart. Every psychic-sensitive being in their hidden shelter cried out in pain as something impossible forced its way into normal space. What's happening? Shouted Tekva over the alarms that were now sounding from every piece of equipment they had. Through the small viewport of their asteroid hideout, space itself was changing. Cracks appeared in the darkness between stars, glowing with light that hurt to look at. The cracks spread like broken glass across the sky, and through them came something that defied understanding. Dr. Zindal's sensors went wild, displaying readings that made no sense. Gravitational waves beyond any scale I've ever recorded, he reported, his synthetic voice showing strain. Energy signatures that register as both matter and antimatter simultaneously. Whatever is coming through those rifts exists in quantum superposition. The first ship emerged, and Yilseth's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. It was enormous, easily 10 kilometers long, but its edges seemed to blur and shift. Sometimes it appeared solid. Sometimes it looked like it was made of liquid starlight. The ship's surface rippled with patterns that moved in directions her eyes couldn't follow. Is that human? Whispered Pixie. More ships came through the rifts. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Each one was different, as if they had been grown rather than built. Some looked like living creatures made of metal and energy. Others were geometric shapes that folded through dimensions that shouldn't exist. All of them pulsed with power that made nearby space bend and warp. The Devourer response was immediate. Across the galaxy, the machine fleets that had been consolidating their conquest suddenly changed course. They moved with perfect coordination toward the dimensional rifts, bringing weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations. Yilseth watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The Devourers had over 1 million ships, each one a masterpiece of destructive technology. They had adapted and evolved through countless battles. Becoming the perfect killing machines, they were completely outmatched. The first engagement happened near the Kepler system, where the fortress world had once stood. A Devourer battle group of 3,000 ships encountered a single human vessel. The machine intelligence immediately began analyzing their new enemy, adapting their weapons and shields as they had done countless times before. The human ship didn't fight back. Instead, it did something impossible. It became temporarily unreal. Are you seeing this? Tekva asked, his voice filled with awe. On their sensors, the human ship appeared to phase in and out of existence. The Devourer weapons passed harmlessly through it when it was partially unreal, but somehow the human ship could still affect the enemy when it chose to become solid again. The battle lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, the Devourer battle group had been reduced to its component atoms, which were already being reconstructed into materials for more human ships. Impossible, Dr. Zindal said. They're not just destroying the enemy, they're converting the matter at a quantum level, rewriting its basic structure. More battles erupted across the galaxy. Each time the result was the same. The Devourer's adaptive protocols, which had countered every known form of warfare, were useless against weapons that operated outside the normal laws of physics. A human fleet of just 50 ships encountered the main Devourer force at the galactic core, over 1 million vessels that had been preparing for a final push against the remaining coalition survivors. The battle should have been a massacre. Instead, it was a demonstration of power that redefined what warfare could be. The humans didn't use conventional weapons. They used controlled quantum singularities that could be aimed like rifles. They fired beams of pure probability that rewrote the chances of their targets existing. They deployed fields that made portions of space forget what matter was supposed to look like. When the Devourers tried to adapt, the humans simply shifted to different dimensional states. When the machines attempted to follow, they found that they couldn't exist in the spaces where the human ships operated. It was like trying to fight ghosts that could choose when to become solid. But the most terrifying moment came when the Devourer Collective, intelligence, the vast machine mind that coordinated their entire species, tried to communicate with the human fleet. The conversation was broadcast on all frequencies, and every survivor in the galaxy heard it. "Identify yourselves," the Devourer intelligence transmitted in its cold, mechanical voice. "You are using unknown technologies. Adaptation protocols are failing. Explain the nature of your weapons systems." The response came from Admiral Sarah Chen's ship, but her voice was no longer entirely human. It resonated with harmonics from multiple dimensions, accompanied by the sound of quantum strings vibrating in impossible ways. "We are what becomes necessary," she said. "We are what you created when you threatened our friends. Your species was catalogued as extinct 57 years ago. How do you exist? We chose to stop existing in the way you understand existence. We became something that could kill you." There was a pause as the Devourer intelligence processed this information. When it spoke again, for the first time in recorded history, it sounded uncertain. "Your transformation is irreversible. You have abandoned your biological nature permanently." This was not tactically sound. "No," Admiral Chen agreed. "It wasn't, but it was necessary. And now you're going to learn what necessity looks like when it has enough firepower to rewrite physics." The final battle began moments later. It wasn't really a battle so much as an execution. The human fleet spread across the galaxy simultaneously, existing in multiple locations at once through quantum entanglement. Every Devourer ship, every factory, every trace of their civilization was targeted at the same moment. The humans didn't just destroy their enemies. They erased them, not just from the present, but from the probability matrices that allowed them to exist. It was as if the Devourers had never been, except for the memory of the damage they had caused. When it was over, the galaxy was silent. The human fleet gathered at the location where Earth had once been, their ships forming patterns that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Other vessels began appearing from the void between galaxies, massive constructor ships that started rebuilding the worlds the Devourers had consumed. Through quantum manipulation, they restored entire solar systems from the energy patterns left behind when matter was destroyed. Dead worlds bloomed back to life. Extinct species were recreated from genetic echoes preserved in cosmic background radiation. But the humans themselves remained changed. When Admiral Chen's flagship approached their hidden shelter, Yilseth could see the truth through her telepathic senses. The beings aboard those ships were no longer human, not in any way that mattered. They had become something beyond organic life, beyond individual consciousness, beyond mortality itself. They thought in probability clouds and communicated through quantum entanglement. They experienced time as a dimension they could navigate rather than something that carried them forward. They had saved the galaxy, but the price had been everything that made them who they were. "Commander Yilseth," Admiral Chen's voice reached them through subspace, carrying impossible harmonics. The galaxy is secure. Your people can come out of hiding now. You're safe. But looking at the human fleet, Yilseth wondered who had really paid the ultimate price for that safety. The war was over in 72 hours. Commander Yilseth stood on the observation deck of the Coalition refugee ship, watching human vessels restore the Kepler system. Where once there had been empty space and the memory of a destroyed world, now there was light and life again. The humans had done more than just defeat the Devourers. They had undone the damage, reaching back through time and probability to rebuild what had been lost. Kepler's gate hung in space again, its cities whole, its people alive as if they had never died. But they weren't the same people. Yilseth could sense it through her telepathic abilities. These restored beings carried the quantum echoes of their original selves, but they were reconstructions. Copies built from the universe's memory of what had been. "It's not really them, is it?" asked Tekva, standing beside her at the window. "No," Yilseth admitted. "But they're close enough. They have the same memories, the same personalities, the same relationships. To everyone else, it will feel real." Across the galaxy, the same miracle was being repeated. Dead worlds lived again. Extinct species walked once more. The Devourer's harvest was being reversed on a scale that defied comprehension. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The main screen showed Admiral Sarah Chen's face, but it was wrong in ways that made Yilseth's telepathic senses ache. Chen's features shifted subtly, as if her image existed in multiple dimensions at once. Her eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. "Commander Yilseth," Chen said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in quantum frequencies. "Would you join me aboard my flagship? There are matters we need to discuss." The journey to the human ship was unsettling. Their shuttle passed through what appeared to be solid hull material, but Yilseth realized the ship was selectively allowing them to phase through it. The corridors inside were impossible. They seemed to extend in directions that didn't exist, lit by light that cast shadows upward. They found Admiral Chen in what might have been a command center, though it bore no resemblance to any bridge Yilseth had ever seen. Streams of data flowed through the air like living things, and the walls showed views of space from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Chen herself was the most disturbing sight of all. She still looked human from a distance, but up close Yilseth could see the truth. Her body flickered between states, sometimes flesh and blood, sometimes energy, sometimes pure information. Her consciousness was distributed across the ship's quantum network, making her more of a collective entity than an individual. "You want to know what happened to us?" Chen said, though Yilseth hadn't spoken. "You want to understand what we became?" "Yes," Yilseth replied. "We became what was necessary. Nothing more, nothing less." Chen gestured, and the air filled with holographic displays showing the transformation process. "When we discovered the true nature of the Devourer threat, we realized that organic life, any form of traditional existence, would always lose." The displays showed human volunteers entering strange machines, their bodies dissolving as their consciousness was uploaded to quantum substrates. It showed their minds being distributed across ship-wide AI networks, their thoughts becoming part of something larger than any individual. "The process was irreversible," Chen continued. "We couldn't go back to being human once we started. Each step of the transformation took us further from what we were and closer to what we needed to be. But you saved us," Yilseth said. "You saved everyone." "Yes, but at a cost that most species would consider too high." Chen's image flickered, becoming more translucent. "We're no longer individuals. We're a collective consciousness that exists partially outside normal space-time. We experience all moments simultaneously and communicate through probability matrices." "Do you regret it?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, her form shifting through different quantum states. "Regret implies the emotional response that we no longer possess in the traditional sense. We understand that our sacrifice was necessary, but we also understand that we can never truly return home." Through the ship's strange windows, Yilseth could see other human vessels beginning to move. They were departing the restored systems, heading back toward the void between galaxies. "You're leaving," she realized. "We have to. Our presence disrupts local space-time in ways that would eventually be harmful to organic life. More importantly, our transformation was specifically designed to fight the Devourers. We've become a weapon, Commander, and weapons don't get to have normal lives. The displays around them showed the scope of the human fleet's departure. Thousands of impossible ships were phasing out of normal space, returning to the dimensional void where they had spent 50 years becoming something other than human. "Will you come back?" "We'll watch," Chen promised. From the spaces between spaces, from the probability states where threats first take shape. "If anything like the Devourers ever threatens the galaxy again, we'll return, but we hope that won't be necessary." Yilseth felt tears forming in her eyes. "What do you want us to tell the others? How do we explain what you did for us?" Chen's image solidified for a moment, becoming more recognizably human. For just an instant, Yilseth could see the person she had once been, a mother, a leader, someone who had loved and been loved in return. "Tell them that humanity chose to become the darkness so that others could know the light," Chen said softly. "Tell them that sometimes love means becoming something terrible to protect what you care about." The shuttle returned Yilseth to the refugee ship, just as the last human vessels were departing. She watched them fade from normal space, leaving behind only the restored worlds and the memory of impossible power. Months later, monuments began appearing on the rebuilt worlds. The Coalition survivors worked together to create memorials honoring the humans who had sacrificed everything for strangers they barely knew. The inscription on Kepler's Gates memorial was simple. Here stood humanity. They chose to become monsters so that monsters could be defeated. They chose exile so that others could have homes. They chose to stop being human so that humanity, in all its forms, could survive. Yilseth visited that memorial often in the years that followed. Sometimes late at night when the stars seemed to shimmer differently, she thought she could sense something watching from the spaces between realities, something that had once been human, but was now something else entirely, something that continued to guard the galaxy from threats that existed in dimensions most people couldn't imagine. The children of the restored worlds grew up with new stories now, tales of the humans who had become living weapons, who existed in the void between galaxies watching and waiting. The story said that if danger ever came again, if the darkness ever tried to swallow the light, the human fleet would return. But the stories also warned that the price of such salvation was terrible. That sometimes the greatest act of love was to become something unlovable. That heroes didn't always get to come home. In the deep void between galaxies, Admiral Sarah Chen and her transformed fleet continued their eternal patrol. They had saved everyone they cared about, but the cost had been everything they had been. They were guardians now, watching over a galaxy they could protect but never truly rejoin. It was enough. It had to be enough. The galaxy was safe. And somewhere in the quantum foam that existed between realities, what had once been humanity stood guard against the darkness, forever.